My name is Nate, and welcome to Wesensschau. Today we'll be discussing churches on Mars. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. God created the heaven and the earth. This is the creation of the throne room of God and the creation of the formless cosmos. St. Augustine describes this as the creation of matterless form and formless matter. On the second day of creation, we see the formless primordial ocean of matter, which in Genesis 1:1 is named ERETS, given form and geometry. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. The firmament is the heaven which images the heaven of heavens, or the throne room of God, which is the heaven of day one. The firmament is the first imprint of heavenly form on the ERETS, or the earth of day one. On day 3, we then see the waters below the firmament formed into the earth, more specifically the planet Earth. This gives us a 3-decaed cosmology of earth, firmament, and then the throne room of God, or the third heaven, because on the earth we have the first heaven, the second heaven is everything which is beyond the earth, that's the firmament, and then above the firmament, above the waters above, we have the throne room of God, which is the heaven after which the firmament was created. And this 3-decaed cosmology is the image after which the ark, the tabernacle, the temple, the New Testament church are all designed. Man himself is fashioned as a microcosm which encapsulates this cosmological structure within himself. I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing this cosmology. That's an entirely separate topic. I just wanted to briefly lay it out to set the frame for the discussion of space travel. When we talk about space travel, what we mean is the exploration of the firmament, which is the visible universe which images the throne room of God. It is the created type of heaven within the material universe. The Earth itself is a microcosm of the universe at large. The Earth has its own image of the heavens, which is the blue atmosphere, which images the sapphire veil above the firmament, as we see in Ezekiel 1. The sapphire, which is at the foot of the throne of God. We also see that when Moses sees heaven before him. The blue sky of the earth is often called the first heaven, or the atmospheric region, or the air. Ephesians 2 tells us that the devil is the prince and power of the air, and Revelation gives us a similar story. Man gave dominion of the earth, or the air, over to the devil in the sin of Genesis 3. Homer categorizes the air as that which is within the atmospheric region of the earth. Philo, C.S. Lewis, and many early Christian authors agree, calling the air everything from the earth to the moon. The air, or the earth as a planet, is the sublunar realm. This can be understood as the area over which man has been given direct dominion. In Genesis 3, man opened up this air, he opened up the earth to Satan, and so Satan became the prince of the air, with his angels sitting in the atmosphere, ready to attack any soul making its way up to heaven. This is actually where we get the tradition of toll houses from. The names of things here in this 3-decaed cosmology have some overlap. The earth is simultaneously everything created from the formless primordial ocean of matter, and it is also simply just the planet we live on. Later in Scripture, we also see the word ERETS, which is the word used for earth in Genesis 1:1. We also see that word used to describe certain plots of land. Heaven, in this context, can either be both the firmament and the throne room of God, or just the throne room of God, the matterless form of Genesis 1:1. I think that the ambiguity here is intentional and is indicative of the domains and dominion of God and of man. In the cultural mandate of Genesis 1:28, man is very obviously given dominion over the earth, as in the planet. But the word used here, ERETS, is also again used in Genesis 1:1 to describe the primordial ocean of matter as a whole. In Psalm 115, verse 16, we are told that the highest heavens are God's and that the earth, or ERETS, is man's. I think what's implied here is that the dominion of man is definitely over the earth, as in the planet, and that the more general ERETS, being all of visible creation, is to be under man's dominion as he dialogues with God. The firmament is associated with heaven insofar as it is called the heavens, and it is beyond the scope of the air or the planet Earth. But the firmament is also associated with the earth insofar as it is a part of the general ERETS, which was formed out of the primordial formless matter, held in contrast with the matterless form, or the heaven, of Genesis 1:1. If we think about the structure of the tabernacle, or the temple, there's the sanctuary and the holy place, with the holy place having two divisions, the holy place and the holy of holies. So we can either think about it as the sanctuary and the holy place having one division, or we can think about two divisions and three different areas, those being the sanctuary, the holy place, and the holy of holies. We can also think about it a different way, with the holy of holies being one place, and then everything outside of the holy of holies being another place. The cosmos is similar. There's the earth and the heavens, which can be divided into the celestial heavens and the heaven of heavens. But we can also think about it another way. We can think about it in the context of the heaven of heavens being one place, and then everything outside of that being the ERETS. And note how when God judges his work in the firmament on the second day of creation, he doesn't say, "and it was good," like he does with the other work on the other days. Rather, Genesis 1:7 tells us, "and it was so." This doesn't mean that the firmament is bad, rather just that it isn't eschatological. In the eschatological marriage between heaven and earth, when the crystal veil is lifted, as we're told about in Revelation, there will no longer be this ambiguous domain. Rather, it will simply be, the firmament will simply be one with the married heaven and earth, perfectly under the dominion of God and perfectly under the dominion of man. But more on this later. For now, the firmament is sort of this place of ambiguous dominion, and as we see in the vision of Ezekiel 1, the firmament is inhabited by angels, who James Jordan describes as drill sergeants for man. The angels are there to lead us up towards God in a way which they are unable to do themselves. Throughout Scripture, we see the heavenly host associated with the celestial bodies. It's not random that in the 2x3 structure of the 6 creation days, the creation of the celestial bodies on day 4 parallels the creation of the heavenly hosts or angels on day 1. In the Orthodox Church, there is a feast day of the 7 archangels. The 7 archangels having an analogous relationship with the 7 wandering planets of antiquity, those being the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These also correspond with the 7-branched menorah in the holy place of the tabernacle. The holy place itself, as mentioned earlier, as a whole, symbolizes the firmament. The cosmos is a much more mystical place than we often realize, and this is a point that C.S. Lewis loves to hammer home. Stars are not just big balls of gas, and planets are not just big rocks. They're celestial bodies arranged in concentric circles which radiate throughout the cosmos. The celestial bodies are musically and liturgically arranged, leading angelic processions to the glory of God. Following this thought of the procession of the celestial bodies, the promise to Abraham that his seed will be like the stars of the sky in Genesis 15 can be understood as an allusion to this angelic procession of the celestial bodies. We can see in the book of Numbers, in the census of the tribes, which in a way orbit or surround the tabernacle, we see a consistent appearance of astral numbers within the actual populations of the different tribes. This is an idea pursued by Barnouin in some French articles available online. I'll link them in the description below, but if you want English translations of them, you'll have to do that yourself. I just use Google Translate. I don't speak French. But anyways, this consistent appearance of astral numbers in the census of the tribes, which again, they're in a sort of an orbit or a procession around the tabernacle. It shows us that Israel has become like the celestial bodies, participating in the angelic processions around God's house. So, Abraham's seed, after passing through the Exodus prophesied of in Genesis 15, also fulfills the promise of Genesis 15 that they will be like the celestial bodies, leading an angelic and cosmic procession. Now, I think that the promise to Abraham does go beyond this. God tells Abraham, "Look at the stars and count them, if you are able. So shall your seed be." This promise calls back to the promise of Genesis 13, that if man can count the dust of the earth, so shall Abraham's seed be counted. The point being made here, I think, is that the only one who can count the dust and the stars is God. Being able to number, count, or name things denotes dominion over them. In Genesis 14, Abraham, or Abram at this point in time, calls God the possessor of heaven and earth, the God who has dominion over both heaven and earth. Also in Genesis 14, we hear Melchizedek call Abram the possessor of heaven and earth. The point being made there is the same thing that we see happen throughout Abraham's life as a whole. So long as Abraham pitches his tent next to the altar of God, so long as Abraham dialogues with God, God will rain blessings on him, and God will exalt Abraham and make him the possessor of heaven and of earth. So just as God, as possessor of heaven and earth, brings man in to be possessor of heaven and earth alongside himself, God, as the only one who can count the dust and the stars alike, will make man able to count the stars of heaven and the dust of the earth. I don't think it's unreasonable to interpret these promises of Genesis 13 and of Genesis 15, as saying that once man has achieved complete dominion over the entire cosmos through dialogue with God, once man understands the fractal immanence of God in all things, from the microscopic dust of the ground all the way to the stars of the cosmos, then shall the seed of Abraham be complete. Once man is able to count the dust of the earth and the stars of the cosmos as co-possessor with God of heaven and earth, then will Abraham's seed be counted. Then will his seed be complete. God, as possessor of heaven and earth, is progressively revealing to Abraham and to man as a whole the extent to which man's dominion is to expand. In the life of Abraham, for example, we see in verse 18 of Genesis 15, Abraham's seed is given direct dominion over the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. And as we go through the Old Testament, we will see this progressively expand until in Isaiah 66, we see the entire earth filled with the glory of God. Psalm 8 tells us that man is to have dominion over all the works of God's hands. A few verses earlier in the same psalm, we are told that the works of God's hands are the moon and the stars. Deuteronomy 4:19 issues a warning not to worship the celestial bodies. "And take heed, lest you lift your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the host of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under the whole heaven as a heritage." God has given us the stars and the planets as a heritage. It is wrong for us to worship that which we are meant to have dominion over. Deuteronomy 30, verse 4, gives another celestial themed promise. Now, a lot of English translations get this verse wrong, but translating as accurately as I can as a non-Hebrew speaker, it reads as follows: "Even if you have been cast unto the edge of the heavens, God will gather you and take you from there." Now, this could just be hyperbole, but I don't think that the language here is just randomly chosen to exaggerate the point being made. I think the language here is used in a very specific way to make a very specific point. I think that there will come a time where man will have dominion even until the very edge of heaven. And even at the farthest corner of the cosmos, God will still gather you and return you from there. The language of being gathered and returned is the language of reversion, which according to the Dionysian dyad always follows a procession. The very structure of the cosmos is one of procession and reversion. Star systems aligning themselves in concentric circles radiating outwards. We can understand the expansion of dominion, even unto the edge of heaven, as the fulfillment of the cultural mandate which tells man to fill the ERETS, and to be fruitful and multiply. Now, the way in which man is fruitful and multiplies is through the union of marriage, wherein two flesh become one. This isn't just the bringing together of two particulars into one united whole, which is a reversion, but it's also the productive union which brings forth fruit. It brings forth another branch on the family tree of humanity. As man becomes more and more united, so also man branches further and further out. This is procession and reversion. As man proceeds further and further, becoming more and more particular and more unique, So also man's unity is strengthened, and the gathering reversion of all things to the universal logos is made more joyful and more powerful. As dialogue becomes greater and greater, dialogue being the procession and reversion of being between persons, the scope of this dialogue reaches further and further out, and as two persons dialogue and become more united, so their scope of dialogue becomes greater. As procession increases, so does the reversion. Dialogue is the fundamental task given to man. Man is to venture out into the wilderness and transform it into a home. We go out, we transform nature, and we assimilate it onto ourselves as a sort of clothing or extension of our body. I mean, if you really think about it, a car is just really bulky, resistant clothing. Same thing with a spaceship or a submarine. Cars, spaceships, submarines, they're just clothing that we put on ourselves. We clothe ourselves with that technology so that we can go out to places that we wouldn't be able to do or that we wouldn't be able to explore without that clothing. It's the same idea as winter jackets or clothing in general. You wouldn't go outside in minus 40-degree weather without a winter jacket on. You'd hurt yourself. So you go out into creation, you gather supplies, you gather resources, and you create clothing that allows you to go out into these more and more extreme environments in a way that you wouldn't be able to do without that technology. So we go out, we gather creation onto ourselves as clothing, as an extension of our body, and then we offer our body up unto God for Him to fill and exalt. And so nature, which has been assimilated onto our body, becomes not only a body for ourselves, but a body for God, a body by which God makes Himself manifest in creation. This is the dialogical transformation of the wilderness into a home for us, and more ultimately into a home for God. Isaiah 40, verse 22, is a verse that I would like to highlight in this context. Isaiah 40:22 tells us that God stretched out the heavens like a tent, a house to dwell in. Bringing this back to the points made at the beginning of the video, Earth, or the sublunar realm, just to bring this point back, was given over to the devil, or the prince of the air, by man in Genesis 3. Christ came back and broke this power in His work on this earth. In John 10, we hear Jesus quote Psalm 82, which is the casting out of the demonic powers for the institution of godly men as rulers to come about. It's the reversal of Genesis 3. The task of the church, who has been given the keys which bind the devil, is to bring about this casting out of the demonic powers and the ushering in of God into the world. So far, man has been unable to settle, now talking about the actual colonization of space, man has been unable to settle beyond the moon, beyond the silver gate of heaven. That's the boundary between us and deep space. That's the boundary between the first heaven and the celestial heavens, the firmament of the second day. Of course, we've sent probes and robots out there, but we haven't been able to actually tread upon and establish dominion over the other celestial bodies in a real way like we have been able to on the earth. Perhaps this is because we still need to conquer and establish dominion over the earth. C.S. Lewis, in the Space Trilogy, explores the idea of an unrighteous man venturing out beyond the scope of the moon and acting as the corrupter, bringing sin to other planets. Dostoevsky also explores this idea in his Dream of a Ridiculous Man. In both cases, this is a cosmic disaster which needs to be fixed. Maybe it is only after man binds and casts out the demonic powers of the air on earth that man can, or at the very least should, venture out and act as image of God, proverbially removing the veil between the second heavens and the earth, assimilating the whole cosmos onto himself to offer unto God in the day that God unveils the ERETS of Genesis 1, bringing about the marriage feast between heaven and greater earth, that is, the whole cosmos. Man is to act as image of God, going out and creating new worlds. He's to go out and fill the space. It is interesting that oftentimes we just refer to the firmament or the heavens as space, because right now it is mostly just space. And perhaps it's man's job to go out there and fill this space, dialogically with God, of course, to fill this space with the glory of God and make it more than just space, and make it more really and more actually the heavens that God created on the second day. Maybe we're to go out there and explore the potentials that are already present within the firmament and make those actual and actualize and bring the glory of God into the whole cosmos. We're to go out and we're to turn the firmament into an actual part of Earth. We're to lift the veil, the blue atmosphere, the blue sky, between the Earth and the heavens. We're to lift that veil up, acting in the image of God, and assimilate all of the cosmos onto Earth as one great ERETS. There is no other planet like Earth, and it's our task to go out and create more Earths, filling the emptiness, filling the darkness of space, just as God filled the dark, formless, and void Earth. We're to go out and follow the example that God has set for us in Genesis 1 and 2, creating ecosystems and beautiful biomes filled with all sorts of beautiful plants and creatures. We're to go out and we're to assimilate all of creation onto ourselves. We're to go out and to present all of the ERETS, the entirety of the material world which God has created for us. We're to go out and we're to assimilate it all onto ourselves and present it all unto God, for Him to glorify on the eschatological 8th day, where heaven and earth will finally be married once and for all. Maybe the idea of an intergalactic theocratic empire hasn't just been a pipe dream this whole time. Maybe it truly is God's will for us to go out and build churches on Mars. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts on this topic. Let me know what you want to hear more of in the future. Pray for me, and God bless you.